الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له أشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل وسلم وبارك عليه وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون أما بعد. My dear brothers and sisters, we are in most difficult times, having seen our dear beloved Palestinian brothers and sisters massacred on a scale which we have never seen before in our lives, most of our lives. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bring our brothers and sisters relief. Dear brothers and sisters, it is especially difficult for me as an American, knowing that it is my tax dollars and ultimately my support as a citizen that is contributing to the reality that we see over there. And there is something that, subhanAllah, I've been listening to some of our spiritual teachers recently, and reminded us of the fact that there has always been this reality of twisting facts. When the ruler employs magicians to change the reality. And as they say, لِكُلِّ مَلِكٍ ظَالِمٌ سَاحِرٌ لِكُلِّ مَلِكٍ ظَالِمٌ سَاحِرٌ. For every oppressive king, they have a magician that's working for them. And the Prophet ﷺ even relates the hadith of the boy who who was with the king, and there was a king who was oppressive, and he had a magician. And that magic of this day, as our Prophet ﷺ, he says, "Inna lamina al-bayan, la inna lamina al-bayani la-sihr." That indeed, in eloquent, articulate speech, there is magic. And so the media of today, in terms of how they twist facts and how they change the reality, is such a hard thing for us to watch every day and for us to read about every day. And Malcolm X, rahimahullah ta'ala, he said something very, very beautiful. He said, the press is so powerful in its image-making role. It can make a criminal look like he's the victim and make the victim look like he's the criminal. This is the press, an irresponsible press. If you aren't careful, the newspapers will have you hating the people who are being oppressed and loving the people who are doing the oppressing. SubhanAllah. It's Malcolm X who said this years ago, and so applicable to what we see today in terms of how America is making, the Western media is making out Palestinians to be the ones that are bringing upon harm, when yet we see the opposite so true. But yet, alhamdulillah, the masses are waking up. Dear brothers and sisters, it's important that we start to put perspective on things and understand that with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the ultimate perspective of why He does what He does and why He allows what is happening in the world to happen the way it is. And in the time of Sayyidina Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu, there was a lot of bloodshed. Muslims killing Muslims, the killing of Sayyidina Uthman and everything that ensued. People accused him of being a kafir. All of these different things that took place. The Muslim Ummah was in a state of chaos at that time as well. And in the midst of that, Sayyidina Ali, he gives us some perspective of good and bad. What is good, what is bad? We see what's happening in front of us, and of course it's horrible, it's beyond bad. What we see happening, innocent people losing their lives, young children being burned and being maimed, and people living in horrible conditions. And of course it's very, very evil. But there's an ultimate, a grander perspective that we always have to keep in mind. And so Sayyidina Ali, in the midst of that turmoil during his time, he's asked, how do we understand these things? How do we understand when there's so much bloodshed? How do we read this? What do we do? And Sayyidina Ali, he says something beautiful. He says, Ya bunay, ma khayrun tatba'hu an-nar bi khayr. He says that, oh dear son, that any good that is followed by the hellfire is not good. In other words, if you think comfort and luxury and wealth and good times and easy going is good, well, the real test is if that is followed by hellfire, that's not good. If you have good in this world, but it means nothing in the akhirah, that's not good. And Sayyidina Ali says, وَمَا شَرٌ تَتْبَعُهُ الْجَنَّةِ بِشَرٍ. And he says anything that appears to be evil or bad in this world, but is followed by Jannah in the next life, how can you call that evil? How can you call that bad? Ultimately for that person and their ultimate salvation. And he says, رضي الله عنه, والعطاء في هذه الدنيا لا يمكن أن يسمى عطاء لأنه ينتهي بالموت. And he says that any good that comes, any gifts that are given, any bounties that one receives in this dunya, it is not possible for them to truly be called gifts and things that are of benefit, because the end reality is death, and what really matters is what comes after. And so it's important that we keep this in mind for us as Muslims, because there are some people who don't understand, and they become desperate, they despair. Ya Allah, why all this suffering? And they don't understand what else may be behind that, and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has planned for the believers. We are seeing these things in front of our eyes, but these patterns have repeated again and then again and again throughout history. So if you think, for example, of Sayyidina Bilal radiallahu ta'ala anhu, Sayyidina Bilal, who was on the receiving end of tremendous torture and suffering. They would put him on the hot sand, 100+ degrees on the sands of Arabia, where you cannot walk barefoot, let alone lay down bare skin, and put on top of him massive rocks